But I think, Sean, we got to start with what happened on Wednesday afternoon, which was the class of 2023 in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And the inductees come out. And one thing I want to be real careful about, I find that sometimes we tear down the people that got inducted. And I don't want to do that here. I think all the people that got inducted, there's a great case for them to all get in. But if I had to ask you right now, about 24 hours after the induction class of 2023 came out, what's your what's your biggest issue right now as you look at what happened and how it played out on Wednesday?
Can we do this? Can I make a request? Before we get into that, can we just spend a couple of minutes talking about Henrik Lundqvist and Carolyn Ouellette? Because I feel like they're the two slam dunk, no doubt about it, Hall of Famers who had just phenomenal careers. And yet it just feels to me like the last 24 hours, we've been all talking about Mike Vernon. We've been talking about Alexander Mogilny. We've been talking about the lack of the other women. And we're not talking about these two phenomenal players. Can we let's before we get angry, can we just talk about how much these two kicked ass?
Yes. And can we all, Lundqvist, it's funny because as soon as Lundqvist got in, you saw a bunch of people say, what about Cujo? What about, and it was finally, did it not feel like finally it was the year of the goalie? Like you've written about this. We've talked about this lack of goaltender. So nice to see Hank Lundqvist on his first crack. I also feel like we don't talk enough about the fact this guy had a twin brother.
Yes.
You know,
another
like is this
another rough day for that guy?
This is a Jose Canseco, Ozzy Canseco, situation.
And he did play. He played for
just like Ozzy Canseco.
Dallas, right? Like he was
Dallas,
and he was a forward, which is interesting.
Yeah,
that you almost, other than with apologies to the Dryden, like you never get a two goalie family. It's just somebody's got to be the goalie, and it's usually the younger. So I don't know how that works when you're twins, but it's boy, I just it's nice to see Henrik Lundqvist catch a break in life. Finally something good happens to the millionaire pro athlete / rock star guitar player / male model / TV star. Finally the dice roll his way and things work out. No, I mean that was great. And then, I mean, you get into the women's side of it where we've got one superstar candidate who goes in. I mean, geez, you talk about, I know in the goalie discussions, right? People are talking, whether Curtis Joseph and Mike Brown, wow, who's a winner? Hey, you want a winner? We just put one in the Hall of Fame because Carolyn Ouellette, you send her to a best on best, send her to a big tournament, the Olympics, whatever, she wins. Just an absolute, I don't know, trophy case full, wall full. Like at some point you run out of space and you're just like, do you have like your least favorite gold medals that are just kind of stuffed away somewhere? I don't know. But so congratulations to them. I guess you asked me like what is really tight. The fact that they continue to only induct one woman.
Yeah.
When there are other worthy candidates it just feels at this point, it feels like there's a stubbornness involved here, because I get that there are going to be some people who say, well, should there be as many women as men? Is look at the scope of the games and how many people are playing and this and that. And it's like, we don't have to debate that. That question has been answered by the Hockey Hall of Fame itself. They have said, give us up to 4 men if there are 4 worthy candidates, and give us up to 2 women. That's it. That's what they want. They want 4 men and 2 women. Now, you can argue over whether those are the right numbers or not, but that is what the Hall of Fame has asked for. And the committee has basically said, no, we're overruling the Hall of Fame and we're going to decide 2 women is too many, because they've only one time used both those slots, and that was the very first time in 2010. Since then, it has been 1 or 0 every single year. And look, I don't care how many women you think are worthy. there's worthy candidates that aren't in. So the committee is not doing its job by continually lowballing on that side of it. We're not in any danger of running out of candidates down the line. So I don't know. And there's been a ton of criticism about this. And again, it just feels like we're into the stubbornness territory. Between this and Mogilny as well, that we'll get into in a bit, it is giving me the same vibe as the Pat Burns situation a few years ago, where you remember that he was certainly worthy. Everybody kept waiting for him to go in. He was sick. We knew he didn't have a lot of time left. There was a sense of urgency of, get this guy in so that he can get that call before he leaves us. And they didn't do it. He passed away. People were very upset. And then a couple more years, they just didn't put him in. And it was almost like, we're going to teach you a lesson. We're the committee. We're the ones who decide. And if the public's going to scream and yell about something, then we'll give you a little timeout. And then eventually they put Pat Burns in, as we all knew they would. It just feels like the same sort of thing. And I know in a way that's unfair, because I'm putting motivation onto people where it may not exist. But given that we have a system where they don't tell us anything at all about what gets discussed, who came close, who didn't, nobody says a word. Hey, sorry guys, if this is unfair, feel free to correct the record. But if you're never going to say anything about this and you're going to treat it as this big secret club where nothing can ever leak out about anything, then this is what fans are going to do. They're going to try to connect the dots on their own. And right now you connect the dots on some of these decisions and it doesn't make a pretty picture.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem, Haley Salvian's written about this, but I think part of the problem on the women's side is just I don't think there's enough people on that 18-person panel who have a true understanding. There's clearly not, because if you did, there would have been somebody joining Carolyn Ouellette, whether it was Jen Botterill, somebody else,
Yeah, I mean,
would have joined.
But the thing is, like, we're not asking them to dig into like obscure history here, or I mean, how to say that Jen Botterill is a Hall of Famer, or Megan Duggan, or Julia Chu, or somebody like that, and just you don't need to look. I'll be very honest. I'm not a diehard fan of the women's game. I don't, other than World Championships or Olympics, I don't spend a ton of time on it. I'm certainly not going to sit here and act like I'm an expert on it. I know that there are some worthy Hall of Fame candidates. Like, you don't need an expert level view. And honestly, if there's anybody on that committee saying I can't vote for these women because I'm just not knowledgeable enough about it, get off the committee then. Because as the committee, you have 3 jobs: builders, male players, female players. If you can't do one of those jobs because you lack the knowledge, get off the committee, resign, and let somebody come in who has the knowledge. But I don't think you have to be a scholar of the women's game in order to look at the resumes of some of these players and say, yeah, this is a slam dunk. What are we doing here?
So let's get into we actually have some emails from listeners all about the Hall of Fame. So it's a perfect launching point for us to discuss some of the things swirling around Wednesday's induction announcement. So let's start with this one. William in San Jose. Hey guys, I don't understand why Mike Vernon was inducted into the Hall of Fame. I was born in 1990, started following the NHL in 95, 96. So I was surprised when Tom Barrasso and Mike Vernon were inducted into the Hall. I only remember the end of their careers. So I looked at Hockey Reference. Turns out Tom Barrasso was an amazing goalie for the Sabres and what constituted a really good goalie in the 80s and early 90s. However, Mike Vernon's numbers are just bad. His career goals saved above expected is negative. His playoff numbers are fine, but not exceptional. What is so good about Mike Vernon that I don't understand? Are we just going to be inducting every goalie with 2 Stanley Cup rings? Is Corey Crawford a Hall of Famer now? Matt Murray, etc. That's from William in San Jose.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of the argument against the 2 goalies that they chose to put in. Let's start with Tom Barrasso. I've always felt like Barrasso had a better case than people thought. That he wasn't, again, we have no idea who gets discussed by the committee. We don't know who gets nominated. We don't know if guys are 1 vote short or 10 votes short, or if they weren't even on the ballot in a given year. We have no way of knowing. But when you talk, when you look at the conversation that happens, the fans and the media around this time of year, we get into it, and we write our lists and all of that. And I always felt like Barrasso didn't seem really top of mind. And I wasn't, I was kind of 50-50 on whether he'd have my vote. But this is a guy who, boy, you talk about some of the things that happened in the 80s that will never happen again. Wayne Gretzky scoring 92 goals and stuff like that. A guy winning the Vezina Trophy as a teenager, right out of high school, in an era now where goalies, we don't even see, your team drafts a goalie and you don't even see him for 7 years. Tom Barrasso gets drafted out of high school, right into the lineup, wins the Vezina Trophy year one. Just absolutely phenomenal. I think I think he's a worthy pick, especially now that we're opening the doors up for goalies a bit more. Mike Vernon, boy, I'll tell you this, as a fan of that era, Mike Vernon was considered a star goalie back then. He was considered, one of the top guys. Obviously, we didn't look at the numbers the same way back then. We goals saved above expected wasn't,
it was all about
wasn't
wins
even a thing
back then.
We looked at wins, we looked at goals against even more than save percentage. And the fact that Mike Vernon won 2 Stanley Cups, won a Conn Smythe, really could have won 2, could have won the one in '89. Like, this is not at the risk of poking the hornet's nest, Mike Vernon was not a Chris Osgood type guy, being good enough on a team. He wasn't an Aiden Hill type of guy being good enough on a great team. He was a huge part of those teams winning. And it's interesting. I know, like, Eric Duhatschek has been banging the drum for Mike Vernon for years and years, and Eric covered those Flames teams. So, I mean, he would know. I know that there's a lot of people in the hockey world who, I've seen some of the pitches that were made on behalf of Mike Vernon, some of the big names that were behind him, including some Hall of Fame names, reaching out to the committee saying, please consider Mike Vernon. Please, please have that discussion because maybe he should be in there. And part of it was just, hey, if you needed a guy to go head to head with those Oiler teams, Mike Vernon was your guy. That his record head to head with Grant Fuhrer was quite good, and certainly compared to other goalies, that that he was that kind of big game guy. Now you look at the numbers, and the numbers make the case a pretty tough one. I mean, save percentage, he was what? Like, he was average, if not below league average. We're not saying bad numbers because while he played in the 80s and they're not, his numbers aren't as good as Henrik Lundqvist. We're saying, like, even compared to his peers, his numbers weren't great. I guess the argument for him would be, he had the longevity. He did win the 2 cups, and when he was at his best, he really was one of the best. And there was, as much as it's kind of a cliche and kind of a weird way to think of it, there absolutely was a time where if you had one game to win, the 1 Game 7, and you needed to pick a goalie, Mike Vernon might have been your guy, or at the very least, he would have been on your list. That's as close as I can come. Look, we do the annual exercise at the Athletic where we kind of make our own committee, and Eric has pitched Mike Vernon every year. I've never voted for Mike Vernon for the Hall of Fame, but I can kind of see it. I don't think it's as far off as some people seem to feel it is, but he would not have had my vote. But our listener asked somebody to make the case for Mike Vernon as a Hall of Fame. I guess that lukewarm case I just made is the best I can do.
Yeah. Now let's get to Alex Mogilny, because in our shadow vote that we did last week for the Athletic, and Duhatschek wrote the story a couple days ago, we selected Alex Mogilny, and I think it was pretty darn near unanimous, wasn't it? It was close.
I think it was unanimous, and it's the third year in a row that we've done it. The third year in a row that Mogilny's been picked.
And in the real vote, Mogilny doesn't make it. Now, you and I are confused by this. I see people throwing out a whole bunch of potential reasons, but again, in the absence of tangible facts, we're left to speculate. We're left to speculate. Is he not in because of politics with Russia? Is he not in because he won't show up? Like if they induct him, he's not going to show up to the ceremony. Like, I don't know. But again, a little transparency on Mogilny would go a long way. Like if we're off and we're like, hey, how come Mogilny's not in? And there's some nefarious reason why he's being kept out, then let us know. And we'll happily stop banging the drum. But until then, it feels a little weird, no?
Yeah. So yes, absolutely it does. And again, we have no visibility on this. Alexander Mogilny, I would say for the last few years has been, my perception would be he has been kind of the consensus best eligible player who hasn't been put in for an awful lot of fans out there. If you ask people who's the number one omission among people who've already been eligible, certainly on the men's player side, I think his is the name that comes up most often. Now, how close has he come? He's been eligible since 2009. Has he been kicking around? You need 14 votes out of 18 to get in. If he's been kicking around like 10 to 12, did he get up to 13 for a few years, but he just hasn't quite got there? Okay, well, that would create one sense of perception. Is he getting 1 or 2 votes a year? That would be something else. Did they even nominate him this year? Did they even discuss him this year or the year before? We don't know. As far as why, look, as a player, I don't think you can make a case that he's not a Hall of Famer. I wrote his piece for the NHL 99 series that we did, where he was named one of our top 100 players of the modern era. I wrote the piece saying, how is this guy not in the Hall of Fame? People can go and read that, stand by it. That's my case for him.
Yeah.
As far as why is he not in, again, the only 3 reasons I can think of is, number one, that they just don't feel like his case is strong enough. He didn't have enough points. He didn't get to 500 goals. Didn't win an MVP. Okay, I don't think that's a strong case, but maybe that's how they feel. The second possibility is, like you said, he could be a bit of a jerk, and he famously didn't show up at an award ceremony once to accept the Lady Byng. Maybe they don't think he'd show up. Maybe he's told them. I don't care about the Hall of Fame. Give my spot to somebody else because it means nothing to me. Be nice to know that if that was the case. I unless we do hear it, then it's just total speculation. And then the third is the situation with Russia now. There were a few reports. I think maybe Rob Rossi was one of them saying that he had heard that given what's going on now, that the Hall of Fame committee is staying away from the Russian players. Again, I think people could understand that these days, but it'd be nice to hear it. And again, when it comes to Alexander Mogilny, this isn't a guy who's only been eligible the last couple of years, and you go, oh boy, given the situation, maybe it's not. He's been eligible since 2009, so they had a decade to put him in before any of this stuff came up, and they didn't. So again, the committee has chosen to treat this as the Stonecutters. It's top secret, and we just have to fill in and try to figure out why a guy who not only at his peak had as much star power as anybody in the league back in 93. I mean, you would put Mogilny right up there next to Mario Lemieux and all the other guys as far as like, Solani. I'm going to buy a ticket to go see this guy. Has the career numbers and the importance that he has. I would encourage anyone, if you're younger or you've come to the game late or you just don't remember the story around there, go back and look at the story of what had to happen for Alexander Mogilny to come over. This guy was the first Soviet star to come to the NHL. He opened the door. You love Pavel Bure, you love Sergei Fedorov, go on down the list. Yeah. Mogilny was the guy who risked everything to open that door for them, had to defect. This was literal cloak and dagger stuff to get him away from that Russian program and over to America. And that's what threw the door open. Just based on that, he belongs in the Hall of Fame, let alone everything that he did. So yeah, I don't know. I can't defend the committee here other than to say they may have their reasons, but since they've chosen not to tell us those reasons, I don't know where that leaves us, other than to say it's a mistake.
Yeah, there's a great story that always goes around from Mogilny's days in Vancouver, where
Mhm.
Mike Keenan is the coach in Vancouver. And Mike Keenan, for younger listeners, Mike Keenan was a real disciplinarian, hard ass coach. And as the story goes, Keenan's in the room and he's lighting up Alex Mogilny and he's kind of threatening him. And Alex Mogilny very calmly says, like, Mike, like, I defected from Russia. They threatened to kill my family. Like, do you think that you're threatening me here? Like,
Yeah.
you
Like
can't,
you're
you
going to
can't hurt me.
intimidate
Like, you
Alexander
can't
Mogilny.
intimidate me. And it's a great reminder. Like, I would encourage fans, go back and read about how the Stasnys had to leave the former, well, now Czech Republic, Czechia, but Czechoslovakia at the time. It's unbelievable. Like having to leave and risk your life. Like, I don't think we realize the risk that they took. And so, yeah, it's just, anyway, it's like you said, we can understand the current political environment precluding him from going in, but that didn't apply in 10 years ago, or at least it didn't feel like it applied. So then they're going to have a real interesting situation on their hands with Ovechkin then down the road.